In California most of the last 20 years, spent my work between education at Stanford and the United Nations. Met a beautiful Tunisian named Soraya Hosni around 10 years ago. Around 8 years ago, we had our first child. And as our first child, we began asking what is their relationship to this space. Meaning Soraya's mother and grandmother grew up in the Medina. And so around that time, one of the things we decided was we were visiting for 3 weeks to maybe 2 months at a time between California and the US. And then we did 3 months. And then we did 1 month in the beginning of the year and 1 month at the end of the year. And we decided that we wanted to spend more time here. A key part of that was looking at the beauty of the Medina, but also seeing the status of a lot of the buildings. And so we began working on what could make the Medina alive again, because we had friends from around the world, and whenever they would come, they would fall in love with the Medina. But there was no reason for them to come at the time. So what we did was we acquired about 5 buildings, which is what you see this space here, and we unified them into one lease, and we began creating what is now the New Medina. The New Medina is an initiative that really is to lift up the beauty of the Medina, not only the people abroad, but also the people in Kantawi, the people in different cities who have stopped coming to the Medina, even if their parents or grandparents used to live here. And it's one thing we've heard a lot from, which is my mother used to live in the Medina, my grandmother lived in the Medina, I've never been to the Medina, or I go there but only during Ramadan. And we said, how can we change that? What I can show you, for example, one thing, which is, that is still loading, so that's having a problem. If I show you this, so this is this building 3 years ago.
3 years ago only.
Yeah. When you look out to the patio, and so we do 2 things, which is we try to remind people that even if 20% of the Medina may look like this, with a little bit of love and inspiration and vision, it can look like this. And that is the core of what we do. Then there's the programs and projects. We host chefs from different countries in different parts of the world. We have a collaboration with the US Embassy, where we resource 16 chefs, 16 artists to stay a week to a month in the Medina of Sousse in our residency spaces to explore what food and culinary heritage the country has, and then to mash up with their own unique gifts, and then to feed people. So we use that as an excuse to invite people who normally would not come to the Medina to see it and to fall in love with it or fall in love with it again. The same for the artists, from screenwriters to filmmakers to textile makers, people who work in Hollywood and movies and magazines. A lot of them utilize African art and patterns in their work. A lot of them have never been to Africa, especially Tunisia. So we invite them to connect with traditional makers, workers, artisans, and then to create unique collaborations that can help the place look a little bit better after they leave. A key part of what we do is children. As I mentioned, I have an 8-year-old now and a 4-year-old. Everyone we've hosted, if they want to bring their children, they're welcome. We find that a lot of the spaces that are designed these days are not very inviting to little ones. And we find that especially as professionals who travel across the globe, If you want to go somewhere, but then you're told you can't bring your wife, your husband, your partner, and you can't bring your kids, you can go maybe 2 days, 3 days, then you have to come back. So we're like, no, you can bring your partner and you can bring your little ones. And that's how we're able to bring people often for a week to a month. Because they've never had the chance, they say, to bring their family. And one thing we know is that the Medina historically has always been welcome to travelers and to families. And so we try to restore and bring that back. And so then we have collaborations in different parts of the country and different parts of the world depending upon the partners we utilize. Any questions before we showcase you a little bit more?
Yes. The 5 houses you bought were already empty or?
So they were all, I think if you ask people, a lot of people whose family used to live in the Medina, but no longer do, still own the property in the Medina. They just never come visit it. That was the case of this building. It was a building that in the 1940s and 50s was very much alive. Even prior to World War II, it was the olive mill of the old city. This entire street is actually Rue Masr. The family that built it, or rebuilt it, I should say, after it was bombed during World War II, grew older. Their children, even though we call them children, were 60s, 70s, 80s. And as we know, there's often an argument about what should be done with the building. So the building had been empty for 20 years. And so a key part of that was addressing every part of an inheritance, that this is what we want to do with it. We're not trying to destroy it. We're trying to bring back the original spirit and then to unify the 5 properties into one.
Have you made an inquiry about the historical fact of these buildings?
Yes. Yeah. So one of my undergraduate degrees was cultural studies and history. My master's is a professor of education. And so I am very much a nerd, as I say, and a nerd of history and of tradition. So it was one of the first things we did, which was not only the history of this building, but the history of this entire neighborhood. From what the soccer field is originally called, Juventus, and why it has that, to the Italian-Tunisian neighborhood that lives right on the other side of it in the 1930s and 40s, to the corner where you see a little plaque, which is where, from my understanding, Habib Bourguiba gave his first talk for the independence of Tunisia, because he felt the importance of the interior region and speaking to the independence to the people of the rural areas should begin inside versus in the capital. And so the first talk was actually given in that corner as well. So we did a lot of history around it. And a key part of how we built is we preserved, where possible, all the foundational elements, all the original tiles. Certain parts of the space actually mirror a kind of Italian Art Deco style, which was common in the 30s and 40s. And so we kept that as well in different staircases. We've tried to preserve that as much as possible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.